Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. We spend so much of our time obsessing over data, tracking massive global trends, and analyzing complex systems. But today we're shifting gears and looking at something much more personal, yet absolutely universal. We are diving into a really powerful distillation of 22 years of profound life lessons, all neatly packaged into a practical, philosophical guide. The source material we're exploring is beautifully titled The Extraordinary Power of an Ordinary Life. My goal here is to walk you through these insights step by step so we can really anchor these concepts together. All right, let's just dive right in.
So what actually makes a life truly extraordinary? If you look at our modern world, especially with this whole hustle culture we're living in, we are constantly bombarded with the idea that fame, having massive influence, and holding immense wealth are the ultimate and maybe even the only metrics of a successful existence. We're literally taught to chase the spectacular. But the source text we're analyzing today, it challenges that assumption right out of the gate. It asks us to just hit pause and fundamentally rethink how we define an extraordinary life.
The author actually lays out the core premise right up front. Over the past 22 years, I have come to appreciate the extraordinary power of an ordinary life. I absolutely love this quote because it sets the stage perfectly for our journey today. It completely strips away the pretense. It's basically telling us that, hey, we don't need to look to the extreme edges of society to find deep meaning. Instead, we can find incredible, profound power in the everyday, grounded, ordinary moments. So let's see how this builds into our first major theme. Section 1. Redefining value and reality. Moving beyond a financialized world. Okay, so before we can really appreciate the ordinary, we have to understand how we currently measure true value, and even more importantly, how we measure reality itself. The source material makes this critical observation about the clash between financial success and actual meaning and purpose. It points out that a society, or even just an individual, that loses its sense of purpose doesn't just sit there doing nothing. Instead, it gradually becomes more and more financialized. What does that actually mean for us? Well, it means that economic value tragically starts to completely overshadow moral, cultural, and human values. When we forget the why behind what we're doing, we just default to measuring how much it pays. The text gives a strong warning here. A life guided by meaning and purpose is infinitely richer than one driven purely by financial success. Building on that idea of value, the author takes us into a really fascinating philosophical observation about reality itself, specifically the objective world versus the intersubjective world. Over the past 2 decades, the author realized that this conflict we often feel between the two is, well, pretty much artificial. Think about it. On one hand, we have the physical world, right? The one that obeys strict natural laws. But on the other hand, we have the human world, which is shaped entirely by our shared beliefs, our institutions, and our culture. The crucial takeaway here is that both of these worlds are incredibly real in their own unique ways, and we have to learn to navigate both if we want to live a fully realized life. Now, to understand how we actually navigate them, the text introduces 2 frameworks. And hey, don't let the philosophical jargon scare you off. It's actually super straightforward. First up, we have logical positivism. This is an immensely powerful approach when we're dealing with the domain of measurable physical reality. Simply put, this is the framework we use to understand hard science, math, and objective facts. It's how we figure out how to build bridges and cure diseases. It is absolutely vital. But then we have its counterpart, social constructivism. This is an equally insightful framework, but it operates entirely within the domain of shared human meaning, institutions, and culture. It's how we wrap our heads around concepts like justice, art, and friendship. The author's massive lightbulb moment here is that neither framework explains everything all on its own. Each one only illuminates a specific slice of reality. By recognizing and validating both, we finally get a complete, balanced picture of the world we live in. We need the cold, hard physical facts for sure, but we also desperately need that shared human meaning.
Section 2. The truth about connection. Quality over quantity in relationships.
Let's shift our focus from all that high-level philosophy down to something deeply intimate, how we actually interact with one another. 150. In an era where people are constantly bragging about having millions of followers or thousands of superficial connections on social apps, the author uncovered a profound truth about human happiness. Happiness doesn't come from being famous or knowing thousands of random people. What actually matters is having a small, tight-knit circle of deep, trusted relationships. The source specifies that having around 150 meaningful human connections is vastly more valuable than countless superficial ones. It's a stark reminder to invest our time and energy where it actually counts. But the text also serves up a pretty grounding reality check about those connections. Relationships evolve. Friendships fade, people leave, and chapters end. It's just a natural part of the human experience. The lesson here isn't to mourn this endlessly or beat yourself up about it, but simply to recognize it. The author really urges us not to cling desperately to the past. Instead, life is basically inviting us to remain open to new relationships, new communities, and totally fresh beginnings as our chapters inevitably turn.
Section 3. Navigating your path forward. The mechanics of progress and action.
So, if we've got a handle on our values, our reality, and our connections, how do we actually make a move? Let's look at the practical, day-to-day application of these 22 years of lessons. This next one is incredibly reassuring, especially for anyone who feels paralyzed just thinking about the future. The source text makes it crystal clear life has taught the author that you absolutely do not need to see the entire destination. Let that sink in for a second. You only need enough clarity to take the very next step. That's it. Step 1. See enough clarity for the next step. Step 2. Move forward. Progress isn't about having some flawless master plan mapped out, it just comes from simply moving forward, one literal step at a time. And as you're taking those steps and trying to leave your mark on the world, the author throws out a really fascinating perspective on where real change actually happens. It's a comparison between seeking political power versus being an activist. The author explicitly states they realize they would much rather be an activist than a politician. Why? Because lasting change almost always begins at the grassroots level. It starts by influencing ideas, communities, and institutions directly, rather than just chasing formal political titles. Real impact? It's a ground-up transformation.
Now, what happens if things just completely go off the rails on your path? The author reflects pretty deeply on the nature of loss, specifically financial loss. Wealth can be lost. Money can literally disappear overnight. But look at what actually sticks around. Knowledge, skills, character, resilience. These are your enduring internal assets. The author emphasizes that because these core traits remain completely intact, it is always possible to rebuild a meaningful life, completely regardless of what happens to your bank account.
Section 4. The glory of struggle. Embracing hardship for a meaningful life.
Now, this requires a massive mental shift in how we view the inevitable difficulties we face, and it brings us to the real emotional climax of our explainer today. Out of all the lessons learned over 22 years, the author states that above everything else, they learned this: struggle is the glory. Wow. It's a powerful and honestly pretty counterintuitive statement, right? A meaningful life is not a life that's completely free of hardship. Actually, scratch that, it's the exact opposite. It's a life that willingly embraces challenges in the pursuit of something worthwhile. The text makes it absolutely clear that it is precisely through this struggle that we forge the very things we just talked about: character, resilience, wisdom, and compassion. You just don't get the glory without the struggle.
And that brings us to the greatest final lesson from the source material. It leaves us with this incredibly profound question to chew on. Are you living for the world's admiration, or are you authentically living? Because here is the secret. An ordinary life, when it is lived with real meaning, purpose, curiosity, courage, and compassion, naturally becomes extraordinary. Not because the masses are clapping for it, but because it is deeply, genuinely yours. So think about how you measure your own days and what step you need to take next. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.